So we've successfully been able to achieve two things. One, which is we've created the cohort dates. And the cohort dates represent the first month they made their first purchase, and the index represents how many months away from the first purchase was that. Now, the cohort date is what we use to create our cohorts. Now, everybody that made their first purchase on the 12 months of 2010 should be in one cohort. And everybody that made their first purchase on the 8th month of 2011 would be in that cohort. So we really need to create a cohort table that will organize this entire information. To do that, let's move on. Cohort table. Now, before we create the cohort table, we need a data frame which contains the relevant information we need from this main data frame. And I can call that cohort info. And the cohort info is a sub data frame from our original data frame. And I'm grouping by cohort date. So I want to pick out every unique cohort date I have and every unique cohort index as well. With this information, I want to know how many customers belong to these unique classes. Customer ID. To know the number of customers, all I have to do is find the number of unique ID that belong to the class. And I can do that by using the end unique method and run. And let's have a look at what we just created, our cohort info. As you can see, this is not in data frame format, so I can just reset index and turn it into a data frame. All right. Now, every unique cohort date we have here is the cohort. Basically, we successfully be able to segment customers based on the first day they made their first purchase. Good. Now, to make this more understandable, I can change this customer ID column here. I can rename the column to number of customers. So let's say column dot rename column equals to create a dictionary, and we want to rename customer ID, and we're renaming that to number of customers. All right. And the in place true arguments to make sure that we're not creating a new data frame, we're only editing the already existing one. In place is equals true. Run that, then let's have a look. We run this code. Okay, let me run this from the beginning and see what is the problem here. Number of customers. We spot the problem here, and we spelled this wrongly. Yes, it also changed number of customers. Now we've created our cohort info table. What we need to go ahead and do is create our pivot table. Our pivot table is the actual cohort table we're trying to create here. So cohort table is equal to cohort info dot pivot index equals cohort dates. And you see what the output would look like. We want the index of our table to be the cohort dates. So it groups all the unique cohort dates to form our individual cohorts, okay? And the column is equal to cohort index. So on the x-axis, we'll have the cohort index of our pivot table, and the values should be the number of customers. All right, let's run this. Good. Let's have a look. Cohorts table. Good. So now this is a very beautiful table with each value on the y-axis here represents the individual cohorts. Now you can see the cohort dates for December 2010. This is the first cohort. January 2011, this is another cohort. February 2011, another cohort. And this cohort is just a group of customers. So we segmented all the customers to different groups, and the different groups based on when they made their first purchase. So that's how we've been able to segment the customers. Now, if you check here, on the x-axis, we see the cohort index representing months after the first purchase. So on the first month, which was on this particular cohort, 12 of 2010, December 2010, we had 948 customers making their first purchase. A month after that, only 362 from these 948 made a purchase. 2 months after that, only 317 from these 948 made a purchase. So now this table gives us an easy to interpret visualization of the number of customers that made purchases from each cohort months after their first purchase. Good. Now to make this more easy to interpret, we can convert this date form to a more interpretable manner, and we can do this by cohort table dot index. Specify the format we want the index to be in. Cohort table dot index dot string f. Yeah, the format, and that should be in capital B. And this format simply says we want it to be in written form. The month will be a written form and the year will be in numerical form. And let's run it and see what we get. Good. Now this is very easy to understand. Now the cohort dates represents each cohort, which is December 2010, January 2011, and so on. And the cohort index represents months after their first purchase. Good. Now with this at our hand, we can easily plot our cohort charts. And our cohort charts will be a very smooth visualization of this entire thing here. And to do that, let's use our matplotlib.figure to specify the size we want to plot. Size, and then the tuple will write the size. Let's say 2010. Yeah, we can do that. Then with our seaborn, SNS.heatmap, cohorts table. And the color we want seamap would be, let me say dark. So I like this one, this particular color. Now let's run it and see what we get. And this is the output. So this is what we get. This is our cohort pivot charts. Now you notice the values within the charts are not easy to interpret. That's because we didn't specify the format we want it to be. So all we have to do is use formats equals put it in 2 decimal place. Yeah. Okay, and let's see what we get. Good. So this is a very beautiful chart that illustrates everything we'll be talking about. Now, this first box, which is December 2010, is the cohort. And on here, you see 948 made their first purchase. And a month after that, I think this is too big. I can reduce, let me reduce the size so that we can see it easily. Good, better. So on the first month, 948 in this particular cohort made their first purchase. And a month after that, just 362 made a purchase. Now you see, this gives us an easy to interpret a demonstration of how the number of customers we successfully be able to retain months after the acquisition. So we are assuming the first day they made their purchase was the day they were acquired. Now, months after that, let's say, I can say for April 2011 cohorts, people were acquired in April 2011. 2 months after that, how many number of them made a purchase? Now, the first month, we were able to acquire 299 on April 2011. And 2 months after that, just 66 made purchase. Now you see, this is a very good interpretation. Now, to make it easy for us to identify the retention rate, we can write it in percentage to know, okay, what percentage are we able to retain, rather than saying the numerical value. Now, to do that, it's quite easy. All we have to do is create a new one, a new cohort table. Let me call it new cohorts table. Which is a cohorts table dot divide, because I want it to be in percentage. Cohort table dot ilog. All right, let's run that and see. Let's look at the results. New cohort table. Good. So this is already in percentage. So what we did was we divided every value in a particular row by the first value. So if we want to know what ratio of this from this value is here, all we have to do is simply divide this by this. That's why you see on the first row we're having 1, which signify 100%, and here we're having 0.38, which signify 38%. So 38% of 1, 33% of 1, and 38% of 1, and so on and so. Good. Now with these, let's plot our cohorts pivots chart again, and we'll see it's written in percentage this time. LT dot, can simply copy this code we use here. Okay. And instead of cohort table, we're making new cohort table. And through CMAP, of course, format. This time the format will be in percentage and not decimal point. Okay. Good. Is anything missing here? Oh, I have to cover for this. This one, let's see. Good. Now this is a very beautiful chart. It shows us how many percentage of from every cohort we're able to retain month after month after month. Now I can easily come to July cohort and ask myself, how many percentage of July cohorts were we able to retain 5 months after acquisition? Now 5 months, I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 38% of them we were able to retain 5 months after acquisition. Now you see, this is a very easy way for us to see how the retention values fluctuate by first dividing them into their respective cohorts based on when they were achieved, when they were acquired, and then seeing how many percentage of that cohort were we able to retain at any point in any time. Now with these, we can know which cohort is doing better than which cohort. Looking at this chart alone, you can see that with a benchmark, there's an average benchmark of 30 to 40 percentage retention rate for every e-commerce platform. Now, using that as the reference point, you can see that only December 2010 cohort is doing better relative to every other cohort. At least we've been able to successfully retain a minimum of 27% and a maximum of 50%. Now the value fluctuates mostly between 38, 33, between the 30% range. So this now can give the company more insight to know which particular set of customers are doing better than which set. So they can look into the December 2010 cohort and be like, what sort of offers were given to this cohort that made them, that made us retain more percentage of those customers? What kind of marketing strategy was applied to them? And what set of customers are doing way worse than others? Now, this is a visualization from the cohort analysis. It tells us how the retention rate has been fluctuating. And looking at this alone, we will notice that on the last month of almost every cohort, we're having very, very low values. And that last month correlates to December. What I mean is, on July 2010, for July 2011 customers, on the last month, which is 5 months after they were acquired, which is December, we had very low retention rates. Now in August, for August cohorts, we also had very low retention rates and so on. And for November, a month after November, from 100%, only 13% of them were retained. So this calls for further investigation. By being able to do this analysis and create this table and visualize how the retention rates have been fluctuating, we've now gotten to understand that every group, every cohort of customers, we've been having very low retention rates when it gets to December 2011. So further investigation should be done to know what the reason why customers are not being easily retained. And we're having a very low turnout from April 2011 cohorts, 8 months after they were acquired, which is December. Only 8% of them made purchase. Now, looking at this alone, we can get to understand that, oh yeah, from our charts, from our sales charts we created earlier on, let's move on to the sales chart and see. You notice that there was a huge decline in sales between November and December. And now, observing our cohort analysis, we've seen that, cohort analysis charts, we've seen that every cohort tends to underperform in December 2011. So this should be further investigated. And this is a classic example of cohort analysis, and how it can be used to observe retention rates and how it fluctuates and how the churn rate varies from one cohort to another. I'll see you in the next video where we'll proceed further with further analysis.